Hi everyone. So if you're watching this video, you've chosen the video over my written summary. Don't blame you a bit. I'm going to try and keep it as short and sweet as I can and summarize the article, and then I'll end with my challenge or my discussion question for this week. So in the written summary that I provided, I first start by saying that in Professor Guo's paper, which is Translating Global Citizenship Education into Pedagogic Actions in Classroom Settings, she started off by presenting a definition of global citizenship education, which I think I'll call GCED from now on. It's just easier. So she started with that definition, and then she supplied some information which we have been presented in the past in other papers in the last few weeks in this course, highlighting the objectives of GCED and the five outcome areas that they focus on. For me, the main meat of this particular paper was when Professor Guo got into talking about how you would present the information in a classroom. So first, I think the first big concept in here was how the presentation or the lesson planning for young students would be different than for older students or adults. So I sort of tried to summarize those in little graphics. So for the younger students, she talks about the head, heart, hand approach. And for me, what this really is basically saying is that with a younger student, you're trying to engage their imagination and get them to have some curiosity about the world around them and the world outside what they're used to. So you encourage them to begin thinking about that. You give them examples of those things. That's the head part. Then the heart part is to start to get them to look at things through a compassionate eye and through with a regard to their sense of responsibility and social justice, and get them thinking about those things. That's the heart part. And then in the hand part, it's providing them with opportunities where they can have some action, where they can do some action to make a difference. So that's the younger students. And then when we move on to the older students or adults, which for me was the part that I focused more on because I teach in a post-secondary setting, so this is more applicable to my reality. She mentioned the open spaces for dialogue and inquiry. I had to look that up. I had to find another article that sort of went into what that is. It may be dealt with in the second article for this week, which I haven't read yet, and it probably is. But what I found was a paper that outlined in detail how it was used, and I summarized it here on this little chart that I've put together. Basically, what it is providing a space for conversation and dialogue to happen, where everyone feels that they're safe to come to that place, present their views without fear of retribution or retaliation. Everybody's views are welcome, and then the discussion around those views is also welcome. That makes sense to me. Certainly something that I can see using in my classroom, and something that I've already used in my classroom. As long as people feel that they're not going to be judged for the views that they have, and we're just going to discuss them, you can have a real open sharing that can happen. So that was the first big concept in this article for me. The second concept was when Professor Guo moved into the 14 strategies that she provided for us. At the beginning of that part of the paper, she mentioned that it can be pretty overwhelming to think about including GCED in our classrooms. And I mentioned in my written summary that that was a welcome statement for me, because it's certainly something that I've been feeling. These are things that I want very much to be able to do in my classroom, but sometimes it feels overwhelming because there's just so much that needs to be done. So for me, the strategies were really important because it gave me a starting point. And when I started to look at them, I thought, I want to put these in categories, like categories. And I didn't even realize that what I was doing was putting them in categories which were really pretty much the same as the 4 that Professor Guo had listed at the beginning of the paper. So that was interesting. But the other interesting thing was that as I went through and read the strategies and sort of reflected on my own practice, I realized that I'm doing some of these things already and I didn't even realize it. So I'll give you an example, which I gave in my paper. It's an activity that I've been doing in my securities regulatory environment class for a number of years. That class is all about rules and regulations and laws in finance, and it can be pretty dull and boring. So I try to make it more interesting. And at the beginning of the course, I thought, I really need to talk to the students about why these rules are needed. And so I started talking about ethical decision making and why people make bad decisions. And at the very beginning of the class, I used this activity to get them thinking about the importance of getting all the information. So we look at 4 or 5 really complex issues like the death penalty, euthanasia, sweatshop labor, things like that. And to start off with, I get them to take an anonymous SurveyMonkey survey where they have to agree or disagree with a statement about each of these 4 or 5 issues. I keep all of that information to myself. Then I put them in groups, and they always think they're going to debate these topics, but that's not what they're doing. What I'm doing is I'm saying to them, okay, your group is responsible for the death penalty. I want you to find all of the information pro and con the death penalty, and I want you to present all of the information from both sides to the class. So in a few days we meet. Each of the teams presents to the class both sides of the argument, and then I get them to retake the survey. And then we compare the differences between the first survey and the second survey. And in 12 years of using that activity, I've never had a time when there hasn't been at least one student change their mind on at least one issue. And it's usually more than that. Usually those students will identify themselves and say, I'm the one that changed my mind and here's why. I didn't know this or I didn't know that. So it's a really powerful activity to explain to the students, the importance of getting more information than what they have been provided by friends and family members and what they might have read. And to me, what that translated into was that I was actually already doing a lot of the stuff in the yellow category on my little chart there. So I thought to myself, for this week, my challenge to you, or my question for my facilitating, would be to get you to talk about what in your classroom activities are you already doing that encompasses some of these strategies that you never even realized you were doing. And if you want to take it a little further, what areas do you feel like you need to expand? So for me, I'm doing some of the yellow stuff, but the blue and the green and the pink, I probably need to focus on. So I hope that starts some conversation for this week. I'm looking forward to chatting with each one of you, and have a great week.